This show is produced by the Hartman Media Company. For more information and links to all our great podcasts, visit hartmanmedia.com.
Welcome to the Young Wealth Show, where you'll truly learn how to make, spend, and invest money for an awesome life. Get the real-life stuff that wasn't part of your school curriculum. Young Wealth gives you innovative new ways of dealing with your finances, as well as the skills and tools you're going to need to survive and be successful out on your own. Let the Young Wealth Show be your GPS to take you from clueless to clued in. Here's your host, Jason Hartman, with Young Wealth.
It's my pleasure to welcome Ryan Narus to the show. He is a mobile home park investor and syndicator and a young guy who is really taking good care of his financial future. Ryan, how you doing?
Jason, I'm honored to be here. I'm excited to have a conversation.
Where are you located?
So I'm in Charlotte, North Carolina.
Okay, great. How did you become interested in real estate investing?
In cliched fashion, I read Rich Dad, Poor Dad, but it was more than just that. It was one day when I used to sell cars, and in my early to mid 20s, I was playing basketball. I sprained my ankle, and I was sitting at home with ice on my ankle, and I realized I'm not going to make any money today. So I ran out to the store, I bought some crutches, and you better believe I showed up at that dealership hobbling on my crutches trying to sell a car. And
maybe you could make some sympathy sales.
You know, it's funny. I don't think I sold a car in that time. It'd have made the story like cooler if I had sold a car. But, you know, it was in that moment where I realized, you know, I can do this in my 20s. But what happens in my 40s, 50s, 60s? You know, God forbid, what happens if, you know, I'm like a lot of these baby boomers who unfortunately are living paycheck to paycheck in their mid to late 60s, you know, what, and you have to keep working.
Right.
You know,
right.
So I was like, I read Rich Dad, Poor Dad, and I went, clearly passive income is the way to go. And real estate is what I chose.
What was your first deal?
So my first real estate deal ever was actually a single family home with 3 beds and 2.5 baths. And I moved into my buddies and thought I was crushing it until neither of them paid me. And I didn't have a lease and I didn't know what I was doing. And thankfully, I bought that in 2012 and sold it in 2014 to go get my MBA. And I rode the wave up. But that was...
You were lucky rather than good, right?
I was way lucky rather than good. And the saddest part about it is I lost 2 good friends.
Because they didn't pay you. Isn't it funny how the people that are the deadbeats, you know, they should be sucking up to you and thinking, gosh, that was really nice of Ryan to, you know, to not pay us. They should feel guilty about that. But it's kind of the opposite. You know,
Yeah.
they disappear or they say you're a bad guy. And, you know, they didn't pay you, right? It's ridiculous.
That is 100% what happened.
Strange thing about human nature.
Yeah, they blame me. And I'm like, what are you talking about? You didn't pay me.
You're the welfare state. It's ridiculous. So did you do more single-family home deals after that, or did you do a mobile home park next, or what was next?
So what I realized, at least for me, is so as a former car salesman, I loved selling and I loved operations, which I don't think a lot of people realize is a big part of selling a car. So, you know, I work for Honda, and the big thing so I used to joke that the Japanese, it's either perfect or a failure. And they used to have these surveys where they would tell the car dealers, because they want to get rid of this idea of, you know, scummy car salesmen. So if we have surveys and we call everyone who buys a car and we ask how the experience went, we can combat scummy car salesmen, right? Well, what that turns into is, well, they tell the dealerships, you can't withhold someone's pay or not pay them a bonus because they got a bad survey. But then we're going to withhold your bonus if you get bad surveys. So the incentives were a disaster. So long story short, what they would do is they would basically force you to get good surveys. And you have to do whatever you have to do to get good surveys. And from what my perspective is if I wow someone with how fast they can buy a car and how easy the process is, I'll get a good survey. So that actually taught me operations. So when it came to mobile home parks, what I really liked about it is, first and foremost, my charity life goals match it perfectly because I've always wanted to help underprivileged kids get their education. So I'm able to do that with my business. Even though I'm a for-profit company, I'm able to give back that way. But also there's sales, there's negotiation, there's persuasion. I actually had to get my dealer's license to sell mobile homes. But unlike in the car industry where you sell a car, you make your commission and you're done, I sell a home and every month I get paid.
Hmm.
And so that's kind of how I viewed it, and that's kind of why I selected mobile home parks over single family homes.
So for our listeners, look, I own a mobile home park, and it's been a really good investment for me. I'd love to do more deals in that space. I've got vast experience in single family homes and apartments as well. But segment the mobile home equation up for the listeners, if you would. Some may not be familiar. You mentioned selling a mobile home. Right,
Yeah,
which is like selling a car, right? If it's a state where the DMV regulates the mobile home sales. But then there's owning the land and the park. And sometimes you do both, sometimes you just do one or the other. Talk about that a little bit so people can understand how the deals work.
absolutely. So I've now been a part of 10 mobile home park deals, about 1,200 pads, and I've bought all sorts of different things. I've bought parks that are 100% dirt, so I don't own any of the homes, and I just collect a lot rent. So it's kind of like a parking lot for mortgages, so to speak, in that your home is it's a home instead of a car, and they say it's mobile, but it's
It's
not
not really
really
mobile.
mobile.
Yeah, it's about
No,
maybe 5 grand to move it or so, probably. So that's where you have no park owned homes. That's the
correct.
phrase, park owned homes. But have you done deals where you've owned some or all of the homes in the park? Yeah.
Absolutely. I've bought deals where every single home is a park owned home, and those are probably my favorite. And the reason why is because I get to build my own community. Because if somebody owns their own home, good luck trying to evict them. It's a nightmare. So if they are renters, at least in the Southeast where I play ball, it's a lot easier to, within 6 months, really have a good finger on your pulse. Because I am very adamant about being on my properties and meeting the people myself and doing my own accounting so I can have a really good finger on the pulse of the community so I know who should stay, who knows the community really well, and who just has got to go. And then the advantage of that is with my dealer's license, I can then go and sell more than 3 homes per year, which if you're going to get into what I'm doing, you absolutely look into getting licensed. Don't get cute, get licensed because the consequences are massive if you get caught selling things without a license. But anyway, the advantage that I have,
Now the difference is though, I think you
sure.
you can sell anything you own or your entity owns. You just can't broker mobile homes, right? What's the distinction there?
Yeah, so it's really state dependent. So, for example, in South Carolina, you cannot buy or sell. So, in other words, if I just went and bought 3 mobile homes, you could run into some trouble, which
For your
sounds a
own
little,
account, really?
yeah, you got to be really careful. And then North Carolina has its own subtleties. Georgia has its own subtleties. Each state has their own board and their own way that they like to do things. And if you are interested in expanding out, you just make 110. It is worth hiring an attorney. It is worth reading up on it on your own. But the advantage of doing what I do, if you're willing to put in the time, sweat equity, and you have the salesmanship, and it excites you because it excites me to go and help good people find good homes, is I get to build my own community. So I get to pick my own residents, and obviously we follow fair housing laws, which same rule apply there. Make sure you know what they are because some states do it differently. And I can get the bad eggs out, I can keep the good eggs, and I can bring in some more great folks, and then I can focus on building a community. So I like to say I'm not in the real estate business, I'm in the community building business.
Okay, good stuff. So, in terms of the homes, I have heard, and I don't think we've encountered this in my park. My manager might know, and maybe we have done it, but I've heard that it's actually pretty easy to evict when they don't pay the land rent. Depends on that state specific, of course, and maybe even county or city specific too. Tell us about that. You say it's hard.
It depends. So I'll give you a good for example. I have friends out in California, and they say it can take up to a year to evict someone. Same thing in New York State. And I have presence in North Carolina, South Carolina, Georgia, Florida, and I'm under contract in Tennessee right now. So I'm specifically Southeast is where my geographical footprint is. And if you own your own home, you can have people out within 30 to 60 days, depending on a bunch of different things. The tricky thing is if you don't own that home, basically what you have to do is one of a few things. You evict them, and it's their responsibility to remove the home from the property. You cannot touch that. That does not belong to you. They can't be on your property, and you can basically arrest them for criminal trespassing if they're on your property. But if they're inside the house and they don't leave, sometimes it could get as complicated as this. You have to actually construct a fence around the home, but you can't touch the home because you can't let people get in and out. It's a mess. And you can also
That's
do things
weird.
like tow a home away. There are companies that will actually tow a home out and basically hold it up for hostage until the people can come and pay this like quote unquote towing company. So it gets really tricky. So what I was able to do, or what I've been pretty good at, is I go and I meet everybody in the local city. I figure out who is in the market to buy a home. And there's a lot of folks who like to go buy used mobile homes, fix them and flip them. And if you can go and find those people, whenever it comes time where you inevitably have to evict someone who owns their own home, you can basically broker a sale without taking a good commission and basically just connect two people together. And if you have an understanding with the guy who likes to do Lonnie deals or the woman who likes to buy
Yeah,
homes and
now a
flip
Lonnie
them.
deal, that's basically a guy named Lonnie Scruggs,
Yep.
sort of that term is coined after his name. And that's where you deal on just the home. Do you want to expand and say what a Lonnie deal is a little bit for our listeners?
Absolutely. So I'll give you a good, for example, I have a property in Greer, South Carolina, and we had a woman, and God bless her, she was on drugs and she was not paying her rent because the rent was going to whatever drug dealer it was going to. And long story short, I got in touch with her mom because I realized, hey, you know what? Maybe I can't get in touch with her. She's not going to be reasonable, but I'll get in touch with mom. And every step of the way, I made sure mom knew exactly what was going on. Mom had the title and mom cared about her daughter, but obviously mom wasn't interested in paying her rent. And that was fine. And I worked with mom to get her comfortable with me to let her know I wasn't just evil, mean landlord trying to kick out her daughter. I was basically like, here are the facts. Here's what I'm going to do for you because I want to make sure that she doesn't wind up on the streets, right? Like if she's chosen some unfortunate things in her life, that's what she's done. But we both agree that we don't want your daughter on the streets, right? Then I went to a handful of local folks that I know who want to do Lonnie deals, which is they buy a mobile home on the cheap, fix a couple things, pretty it up, and then sell it for more than what they bought it for. Now, the advantage of doing a mobile home is I think this guy ended up buying this home for like $2,000 or something like that. And he ended up dumping a couple grand in it. You know, let's say for all intents and purposes, he had $5,000 in it. Well, he can either sell it cash or do a rent to own or have some kind of personal seller carry type option to that person, let them be responsible for the lot rent and everything else like that, and make a profit. So I think he ended up selling for around 10 grand after
Hmm.
it was all said and done. So this guy went in, he bought something for two, invested his time, cranked it up to five, and then sold it and made a profit for 5 grand, which is a lot of people really like doing that.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, the return is good, but scaling is very difficult
It's
with Lonnie
very
deals.
difficult.
So
Yes.
talk to us about how to acquire a park. First of all,
Sure.
how do you find the deals, and then how do you analyze the deals?
Really tough right now because there's a lot of hype around my industry, which I personally think is unfounded. So I was sick of complaining about this. So I actually went and created my own podcast just to infuse another opinion. My podcast is Mobile Home Parks in Real Life, and I stress the in real life portion. I'm not selling anything. I'm literally just like, guys, if you want to get into this industry, here's everything you need to know just so we can stop telling people that this is an easy industry. It's a coupon clipper. It's not. So, because we've been plagued with this industry hype, we've got a lot of folks who've basically come in and they've hired people to cold call owners. They've dumped hundreds of thousands into mailing campaigns. And I was actually on the phone 2 days ago with someone who has just a tiny little park near one of mine. It was 20 lots, tiny little park. And my business partner had called him as soon as the listing went live. So he was doing a FISBO, trying to sell it on his own. My business partner somehow was one of the first people to call him, and he was a wide open book, excited to sell. Everything sounded great, and not but 48 hours later, I called him because I was like, hey, you talked to my business partner. Is it cool if we meet or I drive through your property? And he was a jerk. And he called me, and in so many words, I'm like, what's going on here, man? I know that it's shades of gray, right? Not everyone is a jerk just because they said one mean thing to you. And it turns out this guy had gotten something like 50 calls. And he wasn't being mean, he was being curt. And what I mean by that is he was like, dude, if we're going to talk, I need proof of funds now. And I was like, I understand what's going on now. you are getting bombarded by a bunch of people who think they know what they're doing and don't have any money or can't actually action or want to steal it from you. I get it. So that's kind of what my industry is plagued with. So my strategy is actually to go out and meet everybody I can possibly meet and try to have the best reputation I can possibly have so that when someone does decide to sell, they think of me. And I'll give you a good, for example, there's one here in Charlotte that I had been working for 2 years. I had lunches with this guy. I knew his ex-wife. I did my best to make both of them think very favorably of me. And when it came down to it, they went to court to sue each other during the divorce, and the judge issued a forced sale. And I was one of two people who had their contract and offer on the desk with the judge. And unfortunately, they picked the other offer, which stung because the other offer was only like $50,000 higher than mine, which really stung because I had worked on that for 2 years. But here's the thing. There were two offers on that desk, and one of them was mine. And that is the point right now, is if you are patient, especially in a hot market right now where we're plagued with industry hype, if you are patient and you focus on the relationship game, you can be one of those two. Now, the opposite has happened there where I'm one of a handful of folks and I win that deal. So my thought process is if I can buy 1 to 3 deals a year and I buy them right, if I'm in business for 20 years, if I buy one a year for 20 years, I'm 32. When I'm 52, I'll have a pretty substantial portfolio of parks I bought right. And so how I value them is basically I'm all about location, location, location. If it's in a good spot and the foundation is strong, I want it. I don't care if it's a 1-star property. I don't care if it's a 5-star property. If it's in a good spot and I can provide good housing to good people, I am not afraid of a heavy lift where I got to move in homes or sell off park-owned homes or collections issue or there's crime. I am not afraid of that. What I ultimately want to see is I want to see the potential for rent to come in from good people. So there's a bunch of different ways you can look at this. You can do a cap rate. You can do cash on cash returns. You can say I want to hit a 15 IRR by year 3 and I'm going to exit in year 3. The way I look at it is how much money is going to hit my account every year, but then divide that by time. So in other words, if I am going to exit in year 3 and make $30,000, like that's great, but divide that's by 3 years, that's $10,000 a year. And if I'm going to be on the property all the time, divide that by the number of hours I'm there. All of a sudden it's like, well, why don't I just go get a job at that point? Right. So in other words, my big thing is whenever I'm looking at a mobile home park deal, I'm not looking at just how much money I'm going to make, relative to an IRR or relative to a cap rate or whatever financial metric you want to use. To me, I want to know how much I'm making per time invested. I'll give you a good, quick example.
So you're not using a very conventional way to analyze deals, it sounds like.
Yes and no. Okay. So my business partner and I actually balance each other out very well. So as I mentioned before, I don't know if I mentioned I got my MBA, but I got my MBA from Wake Forest University, and I'm a former car salesman. So I'm an operations guy, business analytics, statistics guy for my MBA, sales, negotiation, persuasion, marketing. I am all of that. And my business partner is a former underwriter, deal analyzer for a giant REIT. So he is more, I'm going to spend 4 hours building together a very detailed pro forma. I'm the one who I've had a couple classes in my MBA school. I know how to put together a pro forma to give to a banker or to investors. But at the end of the day, I'm going to look at it from a more practical standpoint. So if we need to go into the weeds, we've got Ian, and he can go through all sorts of crazy detail. But when you look at me, you're going, I can speak that language, but really, I'm the one who's going, what does this look like on a back of a back of a napkin math? Because at the end of the day, the thing is, if you really enjoy doing pro formas, you're going to spend a ton of time doing pro formas and not actually buying anything. So my big thing is, let's make sure it makes sense on the back of a napkin. Let's make sure we can operate and push it through the finish line. But also let's make sure we are smart about where we're spending our time.
Okay. And for syndication, any just quick tips you want to give there as we wrap it up?
Absolutely. Trust, 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 trust. I can't say that enough. We started with nothing, no money, no experience, no network about 4.5 years ago. And our first investors were people we had known for years. It was all friends and family. Now I have a huge database. And also, by the way, keep track of everyone you talk to. I think I'm at over 600 people now. The thing of it is, my early deals were all people I had known for almost a decade. And what I'm realizing now is that the folks who are basically beating down my door to come and invest with me are also folks I've known for many years. So trust isn't something that you build quickly. It's something that takes a lot of time. And so keep good records.
So,
be able to
so when
tell
you
a
say
good story.
600 people, you're talking about investors you've talked with about potentially investing in your syndications?
Oh, yeah,
Okay.
absolutely.
How many investors have you actually taken money from? Just to give us a ratio on that.
Less than 10.
Oh, wow. So
Yep.
600 to less than 10. So folks, if you are a wannabe syndicator, see how much prospecting really you have to do and how many relationships you have to maintain. So on the 10, it sounds like those people are doing multiple deals and fairly big chunks, right? Like what's your average investment size?
It depends. So the biggest deal we've ever took down was $10.5 million, which was about a $4 million capital raise.
But from one investor?
One investor.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Yep. And then our smallest was, see here, we bought one for $465,000, and it was about $125,000, and that was one investor. So basically what we've been able to do, so there's a bunch of different ways you can categorize an investor, how much money they have, how much experience they have, what they're bringing to the table, right? So are they bringing industry knowledge to the table, or are they completely green to the industry? How much you need to be on the phone with them. And another fun one is, would you be willing to have a beer with this person? And basically you talk to, say, 600 people, you find a handful of folks that check all the boxes, and then you treat them like royalty because they'll treat you like royalty. And I will give you a quick example of that. My Cherry Valley mobile home park in Asheville, North Carolina, we did not pay distributions for 18 months. We made a due diligence error. We did not check the water bills. It was dumb. And we got just absolutely whacked on a small due diligence error, but we had patient money who did not need yield immediately. And boy, have we rewarded him, because that property is worth, we got one offer for more than double what we paid for that property. I'm not saying that to brag. I'm saying that to get across a point of, if you pick the wrong investor because you haven't taken that time to meet all of those folks, if you pick the wrong person, not just will they light you up for 18 months about not getting their yield, but also they may not have the patience for that delayed gratification of when you end up just absolutely hitting a home run.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. Good stuff, Ryan. We got to wrap it up. Give out your website.
Yeah, ArchimedesGRP.com, or just Google me. My name is Ryan Narus. It's Narus. I don't care if you're unemployed or the CEO of a Fortune 500 company. I am happy to talk with you and help you out, and don't expect a thing in return.
And is the Archimedes name based on leverage? I love that.
Yes.
Yeah.
I'm impressed. You're the first person to actually guess that.
Yeah, well, Archimedes was the one with the great quote, "Give me a lever long enough and a fulcrum, and I will lift the entire world." And
that is, yep.
And income property, whether it be, well, residential more than anything, just good old single-family homes, has the best leverage opportunity of any asset out there, or at least any commonly accessible asset. Certainly big corporate raiders do leverage buyouts and such, but I'm just talking regular stuff in the real world that people actually have access to. But Archimedes, that's good. Great quote. Ryan, thanks for joining us and sharing your inspiring story. Appreciate it.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you so much for listening. Please be sure to subscribe so that you don't miss any episodes. Be sure to check out the show's specific website and our general website, hartmanmedia.com, for appropriate disclaimers and terms of service. Remember that guest opinions are their own, and if you require specific legal or tax advice or advice in any other specialized area, please consult an appropriate professional. And we also very much appreciate you reviewing the show. Please go to iTunes or Stitcher Radio or whatever platform you're using and write a review for the show. We would very much appreciate that. And be sure to make it official and subscribe so you do not miss any episodes. We look forward to seeing you on the next episode.